Now I want to shift it, but we will return imminently to this big topic, to a topic that I really like, which is what does this mean for our concept of nature? Is a kind of a surplus already inscribed into nature? My final answer is yes, not in a New Age idealist sense that there is already spirit in nature. I'm just claiming that, and I'm here critically disposed against a certain, let's call it, paradigm. This opposition of a natural balance and subjectivity as the site of negativity, excess, and so on and so on. Even the early Lacan, at least, who was very close to Sartre, we should never forget this, the secret of early Lacan is Sartre, often repeats this motif, how in nature there is sexual relationship, blah, 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 and human subjectivity is a kind of a perverse reversal of nature. Things are no longer natural, death drive, self-sabotaging, whatever. But I claim that this notion of nature as some preceding homeostatic balance, which is then disturbed through human hubris, is precisely the last idealist myth, which is why, incidentally, also for me, this is the worst type of ecology, which this kind of anti-human hubris ecology, we humanity exploited nature too much, disturbed its balance, now we have to pay our price to Mother Nature, and so on. I would like here to engage, it will take some time, but I think it's worth, in a critical reading of one of my teachers, Jacques-Alain Miller, and I think what he is doing, it's not only politically, but also theoretically catastrophic in last years. Not only politically, he now even became openly the member of some support committee for Sarkozy's re-election or whatever. But, Miller's thesis is that nature is today in disorder. Not because it overwhelms our cognitive capacities, like there is so much in nature we cannot ever know it, people knew this always, but because we are not able to master the effects of our own interventions into the course of nature. For example, who knows what the ultimate consequences of our biogenetic engineering or of global warming will be? The surprise comes from ourselves. It concerns the opacity of how we ourselves fit into the picture. The impenetrable stain in the picture is not some cosmic mystery like the explosion of a supernova. The stain are we ourselves, our collective activity. Against this background, one should understand Miller's nice formula. Il y a un grand désordre dans le réel. If you are Maoists, and Miller was long ago a Maoist, you immediately can detect here the echo of, for me at least, the most beautiful saying of Mao. There is a great disorder in heavens, so the situation is perfect. That's how Miller characterizes the way reality appears to us in our time, in which we experience the full impact of two fundamental agents, modern science and capitalism. Nature as the real, in which everything, from stars to the sun, always returns to its proper place, as the realm of large, reliable cycles and of stable laws. This nature is gradually being replaced by a contingent real outside the law, real that is permanently revolutionizing its own rules, real that resists any inclusion into a totalized world, universe of meaning. Now, how should we react to such constellation? Should we assume a defensive approach and search for a new limit, a return to, or rather, the invention of some new balance? This is what so-called bioethics endeavors to do with regard to biotechnology. This is why I'm deeply suspicious of so-called bioethics. Now I will do a slightly boring thing to describe to you where Miller is wrong even more. It will be a long 2 pages quote from Miller, but it's from a programmatic text for a new congress of his Lacanian school, which was dedicated to very bombastic title, The Real for the 21st Century. Oh my God. Okay. Please listen carefully, it's simple. Quote, long quote from Miller. This is something indicated by Lacan's examples to illustrate the return of the real in the same place. His examples are the annual return of the seasons, the spectacle of the skies and the heavenly bodies. You could say, based on examples from all antiquity, Chinese rituals, of course, used mathematical calculations and so on. You could say that in this epoch, the real as nature has the function of the other of the other. That is to say that the real was itself the guarantee of the symbolic order. The agitation, the rhetorical agitation of the signifier in human speech was framed by the web of signifiers fixed like the heavenly bodies. Nature, this is its very definition, is defined by being ordered, that is, by the conduct of the symbolic and the real, to such an extent that, according to the most ancient traditions, all human order should imitate natural order. The real invented by Lacan is not the real of science, it is a contingent real, random, inasmuch as the natural law of the relations between the sexes is lacking. It is a hole in the knowledge included in the real. Lacan made use of the language of mathematics, the best support for science. In the formulas of sexuation, for example, he tried to grasp the dead ends of sexuality in a weft of mathematical logic. This was like a heroic attempt to make psychoanalysis into a science of the real, in the way that logic is. But that can be done without imprisoning jouissance in the phallic function, in a symbol. It implies a symbolization of the real. It implies referring to the binary, man, woman. For this, Miller deserves death penalty. I mean, he speaks like Judith Butler here. Man, woman is a binary. No, it's not, but okay, sorry. As if living beings could be partitioned so neatly, when we already see in the real of the 21st century a growing disorder of sexuation. This is already a secondary construction, Lacan's formulas of sexuation, that intervenes after the initial impact of the body and la langue. Lacan's term la langue for language as the real, prior to meaning just play of obscene significations and so on, which constitutes a real without law, without logical rule. Logic is only introduced afterwards, with the elucubration, the fantasy, the subject supposed to know, and with psychoanalysis. Until now, under the inspiration of the 20th century, our clinical cases, as we recount them, have been logical clinical constructions under transference. But the cause-effect relation is a scientific prejudice supported by the subject supposed to know. The cause-effect relation is not valid at the level of the real without law. It is not valid except with the rupture between cause and effect. Lacan said it as a joke. If one understands how an interpretation works, it is not an analytic interpretation. In psychoanalysis, as Lacan invites us to practice it, we experience the rupture of the cause-effect link, the opacity of the link, and this is why we speak of the unconscious. I'm going to say it in another way. Psychoanalysis takes place at the level of the repressed and of the interpretation of the repressed, thanks to the subject supposed to know. But in the 21st century, it is a question of psychoanalysis exploring another dimension, that of the defense against the real without law and without meaning. Lacan indicates this direction with his notion of the real, as Freud does with his mythological concept of drive. The Lacanian unconscious, that of the late Lacan, is at the level of the real, let us say, for convenience, below the Freudian unconscious. Again, here I start shooting. Lacan regresses here to the worst of Jungianism. You know, this is the standard Jungian criticism of Freud, that Freudian unconscious is too close to logic, it's just a surface conscious, too rational, but there is a deeper, really crazy unconscious, and so on. Therefore, back to Miller, in order to enter into the 21st century, our clinic will have to be centered on dismantling the defense, disordering the defense against the real. The transferential unconscious in analysis is already a defense against the real. And in the transferential unconscious, there still is an intention, a wanting to say, a wanting you to tell me, when in fact, the real unconscious is not intentional. It is encountered under the modality of that's it, c'est comme ça in French. That's how it is, which you could say is like our amen. Various questions will be open to us, for us, at the next Congress. This is introductory address to Congress. The redefinition of the desire of the analyst, which is not a pure desire, not a pure infinity of metonymy, but the desire to reach the real, to reduce the other to its real, and to liberate it of meaning. I would add that Lacan invented a way of representing the real with the Borromean knot. We will ask ourselves how valid this interpretation is. Lacan made use of the knot to arrive at this irremediable zone of existence where one can go no further with two. The passion, Lacan's passion for the Borromean knot, led Lacan to the same zone as Oedipus et Colonus, where one finds the absolute absence of charity, of fraternity, of any human sentiment. This is where the search for the real, stripped of meaning, leads us. I mean, this line of thought, I hope it was relatively clear, is simple, is something for which, if we were to live in people's democracy, Miller would end up in Gulag. Why? What do I find problematic in this passage? Problems begin with the notion of the real as nature in its regularity, as that which always returns at its place. This sounds understandable. You know, in pre-modern society, ancient Egypt and so on, the ultimate point of reference was the regularity of bodily movements. That star will appear every morning at that place, winter, fall, seasons. There is a higher regularity in nature, which should be also this heavenly regularity, the ultimate point of reference for our human universe, and so on. But I think Miller misses something here, which he gives a well too simplified reading of this pre-modern regularity. As it was noted by Lacan, for example, for ancient Aztecs and other civilizations of sacrifice, the natural real was not simply a regularity that cannot be perturbed. Ancient Aztecs organized human sacrifices to guarantee what? And that's what Lacan noted. It's a wonderful deal. Why did ancient Aztecs sacrifice people? Not to fight against chance, not to make it sure when there was a drought that there will be rain or whatever. But that's so beautiful. They did it precisely to guarantee that the most ordinary and expected thing will happen. They sacrificed people to sustain the very regularity of nature. Human lives have to be sacrificed so that nature will rotate in its regular way, so that sun will rise in the morning, and so on and so on. You can find this in what we know about ancient Aztec and so on mythology. Again, their great fear was, if we humans do not perform our rituals, sun will not rise, and so on and so on. Again, the real of the natural order, where everything returns at its own place, already relies on a symbolic intervention. It's not just a natural real which is there on which we can rely. It's not independent of us. We have to sustain it through our rituals and sacrifices. And there is a key passage from this real, sustained by symbolic sacrifice, to the real of modern science, the Newtonian real of natural laws, of the network of causes and effects. It's only this real, the scientific real, which really turns around by itself. I mean, you don't have to sacrifice your, let's say, your mother-in-law, although I would like to do this, so that sun will rise next morning. Why not? But okay, another story. So here again, just one shorter this time, quote from Miller. With the infinite universe of mathematical physics, nature disappears. It becomes solely a moral instance. With the philosophers of the 18th century, with the infinite universe, nature disappears and the real begins to be unveiled. Fine. But I have been asking myself, Miller still, about the formula, there is a knowledge in the real. It would be a temptation to say that the unconscious is at this level. On the contrary, the supposition of a knowledge in the real appears to me to be an ultimate veil that needs to be lifted. If there is a knowledge in the real, there is regularity, and scientific knowledge allows prediction. It is so proud of prediction insofar as this demonstrates the existence of laws. And it does not require a divine utterance of these laws for them to remain valid. It is by way of this idea of laws that the old idea of nature has been preserved in the very expression, the laws of nature. So again, for Miller, even without gods and so on, the Newtonian nature remains the same. It's still nature regulated by eternal laws. Things always function in the same way, and so on and so on. But I think Miller again proceeds here too fast. The break between traditional nature and nature of modern science is more radical. In contrast to traditional nature, whose regular rhythm is supposed to point towards a deeper cosmic sexualized meaning, day and night as the regular exchange of masculine and feminine principles and so on. That's crucial for me. The traditional real, pre-modern, yin-yang and so on, is always a sexualized real, a meaningful real. Something which, that's the whole point of Tao Te Ching, yin-yang and so on, that it's not just blind mathematics. It's a global, guaranteed, stable order of meaning. While scientific laws of nature are themselves contingent, there is no deeper, meaningful necessity sustaining them. When Miller says that today we encounter the real under the modality of that's it, c'est comme ça. But this is precisely how Newtonian laws function. When Newton proposes his whatever formula, it's wrong to ask what cosmic harmony is expressed in this way. Is this a reflection of some deeper cosmic meaning? No, it's not. Although I know very well that Newton himself was ambiguous here. You know that he spent much more time on theosophical questions and so on than on science. So that's my first problem with Miller, that he brings too much together under the sign of regularity, pre-modern notion of natural order, which is always already a symbolized order.